Have you ever tried to understand critical life or death medical information on a telephone that sounds like it was constructed from parts found in a Radio Shack dumpster in 1994? No? Well, that's what happened to me. There I was, standing in your hotel room when a nurse rushes in and hands me a phone that literally is held together with duct tape and rubber bands. On the other end is your doctor, and he has this thick Eastern European accent that you could barely understand him in person. He sounds like Boris and Natasha.
Yeah, okay, so I will play this part. And he said, just so you know, I'm not good at accents. He says, shower of clots, but multiple embolisms.
I'm sorry, did you say shower of clots?
Yes, shower of clots, very, very serious.
And that's when my brain went to the weirdest place. All I could think was, if Alex dies, I still have his frozen sperm. So my sisters and I could raise a baby together.
Wait, I'm sorry. Hard stop. So basically, my brain has been corked. It's not functioning properly. And your first thought upon hearing this is, don't worry, we have Alex's sperm, so it doesn't matter if he's dead because my sisters and I will raise the baby together like some sort of Hallmark movie.
Well, I mean, I have a plan for my life and, things just keep going off course. What else am I supposed to do when there's a doctor who sounds like Dracula telling me my husband is basically a lava lamp full of blood clots? Hi, I'm Lauren Tassi.
And I'm Alex Hooper. Welcome back to Hopefully Kidding, where our family timeline keeps getting a little bit more clotted.
Here's a quick recap. We got married. Alex was diagnosed with Hodgkin's lymphoma. We had a miscarriage. And where we last left off in the previous episode, I had rushed Alex to the ER after he had peed all over our apartment and couldn't remember his own name.
So here we are. It is day 2 of me having been admitted into the hospital. And where do we go from there, Lauren?
Well, I went home and slept that night at 5 a.m. after they'd admitted you into the hospital. They kicked me out. I went home and slept. And I came back the next morning, and this was the beginning of it all. At this point, I learned that the doctors believe it's some sort of an infection. That's why you're swelling. That's what's going on with the memory loss. Basically, what we had thought were the chemo symptoms is an infection.
Okay. But we don't know exactly what kind, right? We don't know where it's coming from.
Right. There's 2 things that are going to be a bit of a struggle with this episode in terms of timeline. I don't remember exactly what happened in terms of what doctor said what to us because it was just so overwhelming and we were dealing so much. The other factor is a lot of times the doctors would come and see you and tell you about your condition at 7 a.m. before I was allowed to come as a visitor. And for the first 2 weeks, you were out of it. You were like practically a vegetable in terms of being able to understand things.
Oh, I was a roasted piece of cauliflower. There was nothing getting through to my actual nerve centers where I could process the information that was being told to me.
So if there are any holes in the actual medical diagnosis part of this story, that's what's going on.
Well, there are holes in my brain, so there might as well be holes in this story.
Right. So day 2 in the hospital, we believe it's some kind of an infection. They've got you on the IV antibiotics. They're also giving you hardcore painkillers every 4 hours.
Sweet.
There was like one moment you were just so out of it and you were scared, right? It's that same thing I saw when we were in the hallway getting the PET scan the day before. Like you were just scared and you were like, why am I here, Lauren? What's going on? And the fact that you couldn't remember was just so scary. And I was like worried, what if you never came back, right? What if I never got Alex back? But there were just a couple of these like tiny moments throughout the first few days where your personality would just come through.
Okay.
So there was one, the first hotel
hotel room.
It was not a hotel room. The first hospital room you were in was a double. When they had first put you in there was another guy who was probably Korean because this hospital was right on the edge of Koreatown. It's owned by Koreans. And he was in a lot of pain and he was just moaning and I felt so bad for him. But there was like at one point, his wailing, his pain, his suffering kind of had a beat to it. And it must have sounded to you like Hey Ya, like the Outkast song Hey Ya, because like he was like, ooh, ah, and you just start in your delirium just going, Hey Ya. yeah. And I'm like, Alex, stop it. Like, cause there's just like a thin curtain between the two of you.
Was I doing it loud enough for him to hear it?
Highly possible. Highly possible.
I'm usually not very subtle when I'm making any sort of joke. So yeah, I believe that.
Yeah. So you were so swollen at this point. We saw it starting the day before. After going to see the oncologist, going to the PET scan, you were just in pain and you were struggling to move. But the swelling, once we got you admitted to the hospital, like you just ballooned up with edema.
So, edema is a medical way of saying swelling, but we're not talking about a twisted ankle. Basically, my body had stopped shedding water weight. So no matter what I was drinking, it was just staying within me. And over the course of a few days, I swelled up 25 pounds. This is basically like helium is being pumped into me like a balloon. However, I'm not going down, but I'm also not eating anything. So my body's puffing up, yet I'm not deflating in any way, which is a very weird sensation. My body essentially turned into a jelly mold. So one of the side effects of me having edema was that I became a hard stick, which meant that anytime they had to extract blood from me, they had trouble finding the vein. And I would get woken up at 5 a.m. every single morning to someone who had to draw blood and do labs. However, I was a human marshmallow at that point. So you couldn't just see a vein. And before this, prior to this, anytime I went and had blood drawn or I was donating blood, they would look at me and salivate like a heroin addict looking at a vein. They'd be like, look at that blue. There it is. I don't have to even use a strap on you. And now I refer to these people as the excavators because they would stick in and go, no, that's not a vein. And they would just dig around inside of me, which at that point, I'm feeling everything. I am in so much pain from the swelling. So watching a needle just go in and out of me, whether it's mental or physical, the combination was just awful. And it was just so terrible.
In those first few days, there were, we had a couple of visitors, and even though you were so out of it was helpful for me to just have someone else there, some support. Mike, who had helped me get you to the hospital, then came back the next day. I'm sure he was worried. He wanted to see you under care and feel better. We just sort of hung out that night. You were still so out of it, but there were a couple of moments where you would like kind of come out of your haze, your fog, and we'd get the old Alex back. We'd get a little bit of humor, a little bit of, your spunk. And that really kept me going those first few days. One of the things that was really hard was how out of it you were. Like you literally, and this was even beyond the first few days, probably the first 2 weeks, you didn't use your phone. Like couldn't call me on the phone. So I was basically out of touch with you unless I was in the hospital. Or I think I figured out how to call your room at some point. I couldn't really text you. You were just... And I understand like all the medication and whatnot just kind of like dulls you, right? You don't really want to deal with all that stuff.
I was so out of it, I couldn't even read a book. Like normally in these times, I would be writing, I would be journaling, I'd be coming up with jokes. But I remember trying to read a book at some point, and my eyes just like glossed over an entire page of words. They were just all clunking together and dissolving into each other. Not only am I not getting out of bed, I can't even sit there and like phase out by reading or writing, which is normal for me.
So at this point, I'm learning how to like be a medical advocate for you, which is something I've never done before. I've never had to really navigate hospital systems. I'm so lucky that your sister is a nurse, and she's a great in-between person for me and your family. I could basically relay things to her and she'd relay things to your family. I was looking back through some of our text messages at the time, and she'd be, ask the doctor for this, ask the doctor for this. And that was so helpful. It was around this time, maybe day 3, that they finally tell us what's going on. Like we get a diagnosis and it's sepsis.
Okay. Can you explain sepsis? Because that I remember never having heard that word before. Maybe I'd heard it, but I didn't know what it was. Like I knew what a septic tank was.
Yeah, it's your body's extreme overreaction to an infection. It's actually very common in hospitals, and today, like 1 in 5 people die who get sepsis, and 1 in 3 hospital deaths are from sepsis.
Yikes. 1 in 3 from the hospital. And so that's the main cause of dying in a hospital is from sepsis.
Correct.
Wow. And 1 out of 5, that means if all 5 members of NSYNC got sepsis at the same time, it would be a bye to Timberlake. Yikes.
Yeah.
I'm bringing sepsis back.
So it's sepsis. It's determined that your chemo port is the source of the infection. And they basically say, okay, we're doing surgery the next day to remove your chemo port. You weren't allowed to eat anything or even have water that night. And you were so miserable. Like you were still in this incoherent fog and they just like wouldn't give you ice chips. They wouldn't give you water. And I just felt so bad.
I love my ice chips.
You really do. So they got the chemo port out. You've been on antibiotics since the moment we entered the hospital, IV antibiotics, but it's not like an immediate relief. You're still swollen. We're dealing with a lot of things. And this is when basically a parade of specialists start coming in. We have an infectious disease specialist. We got a lung guy. We got a heart lady. An orthopedic surgeon comes in. Your oncologist is stopping by. It's a carousel of doctors and you're not eating at all. Like I could maybe bargain with you to eat like an applesauce or a little thing of ice cream when they brought your food tray. I don't blame you. We all know hospital food is terrible, but they sent a nutritionist at one point to be like, well, what do you think would help him? And, I'm like, I don't know. He likes the ice cream. I can usually like convince him to take a protein shake, knowing that's what you needed to rebuild your strength. And that was how you were going to get better. Somehow there was some miscommunication though, because after the nutritionist came, all of your food was minced. It was just like mush. For some reason, they thought you couldn't chew it when it's not that you couldn't chew it. It's that you didn't want to. And then mincing it all was not going to make it any better.
Yeah, I'm very good at masticating. I know that much. My teeth are strong.
So Thursday, you have the chemo port removed. Friday is when a heart surgeon, a heart specialist comes in. You were very out of it that day. I think you were still having a reaction to the meds from the surgery. My sister, Holly, is with me at the time when the heart surgeon comes in, and that's when she tells us that you have a vegetation on your heart.
Yikes. And vegetation is basically extra germs that are on your heart valve. Correct? Extra germs on your heart valve?
I think so. And it's very concerning, and we have to watch this.
And it's a 1 centimeter vegetation.
Yeah, and that was like a borderline measurement between like we need to do surgery versus we're going to keep an eye on this. And she's like, I don't want to do that. Let's keep an eye on this. Let's see. Hopefully it will resolve itself. But it's one of those things where I guess, again, my thinking of all this stuff is like, well, we got the infection thing out. Now we're just going to start to get better. And it was not just up a hill, down a hill. It was a roller coaster of things we were dealing with.
Right, because the port had come out, but the infection had already spread, which is why I had the heart vegetation.
Mm-hmm. And so that was Friday afternoon. That was a really rough day. But Saturday, that was where the shower of clots comes in.
Okay, so that's the beginning of the episode when I'm doing a horrible impression that might be Jamaican, might be Russian.
Yeah. And so we should also mention at this point, your mom is coming to town. Your mom lives in Baltimore. Obviously, she wanted to be there. You were going through all this. She had to take a day to book a ticket to fly out here. We had a conversation with your sister about like, should we tell him I'm coming? And your family's basically like, don't tell Alex mom's coming. He's going to think he's dying. I was like, okay, it'll be a surprise. It'll actually be really nice. Like that'll give him a little boost. So she's supposed to land like late morning, early afternoon. She's going to take an Uber, come to the hospital. She'd be there shortly. That's when I get the phone call from the doctor on the ancient phone, and it's just like so staticky, and I'm just not sure if what he's saying, am I understanding what he's saying? Shower of clots, what does that mean? And he goes, very, very serious. And I'm just like, this guy has been in here for a week. I've been talking to him and he has not acted like it was serious. And now it's the weekend. This is a hospital that has weekend doctors, that basically there are no doctors there on the weekend. And he is calling, it's his day off, to tell me how serious this is. And that's when, for a couple of hours that morning, I was basically preparing myself to lose you, because I thought that's what he told me. And that may have been what he told me. I'm still not really sure, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, obviously he was using words and like phrases that you didn't really understand, but to tell you to brace yourself, prepare yourself for what could be the worst, what else are you supposed to think?
Yeah. So that's when I had the thoughts about, well, I guess we have this frozen sperm. I could, if if Alex dies, we could still have a child together. It could be this sort of symbolic thing and like your life carries on. And my brain went there.
Can I ask you, do you think you would have done that had I perished in that hospital?
Yeah, I think I would have.
So you would have done, and I get it. You and your sisters are very close, and I think, hey, Tassie sisters are raising a baby, and I feel like no matter what, you would have always had a sadness looking at this child.
But if you died, I'd always have a sadness no matter what,
I guess that's true. And then where did the frozen sperm go? So
yeah.
Rough.
So these are the thoughts as I'm sitting there waiting for your mom to come. Basically, I could have called your sister and updated her on this, but I still didn't have all the information. And I was just sort of sitting there in a daze for a couple hours that morning, waiting for more information. Again, I'm like, can I talk to the weekend doctor? Just explain to me what's going on here. Someone.
Right. Actually, can I explain real quick?
Yeah.
So because we just given you a lot of information, what we learned is that my portacath had become internally infected. The infection had spread to my heart, causing a 1 centimeter vegetation, which then moved north into my brain, which caused multiple embolisms at the same time. And all of that was from sepsis because my body was reacting way too intensely to what was going on. And all of my organs were beginning to shut down. That's why I'd been disassociating. That's why my body was swelling up. That is what's leading to all of these things happening inside of me.
Yeah, those moments, the night I took Alex to the hospital where he couldn't remember his name, where he's peeing everywhere, I would see his eyes sort of roll back into his head. Those were the moments the embolisms were happening.
Right. So I had a stroke.
Yeah.
Basically. I mean, I had many little tiny strokes. My golf game score was terrible. Lots of strokes.
So now at least we have some understanding of what happened. We just have to continue on from here. And so this is when your mom arrives. And I remember just being so relieved that she was there. But what was your reaction when your mom, who lives on the other side of the country, walks in?
Immediately, I think I'm dying. I think I am about to die. I had no idea why she was there. I remember her walking into the room and her face just saw me and she had so much joy. And I'm like, oh, fuck. Why are you? I remember saying, why are you here? What are you doing here? And yes, that was my initial thought. So you were right to not tell me that she was coming, because immediately I would have thought, oh, fuck, I'm going to die in this hospital. And this is not where I want to die.
No one should die there.
A lot of people do, though.
So Judy's here, your mom Judy's here, and I'm relieved. I am just so grateful that it's not just on me to make the medical decisions anymore, just because you were so out of it. I couldn't rely on you to be like a partner in that sense.
Clearly not. I can't do anything. I can't even move. I haven't moved at this point from the bed. They're worried about bed sores.
Yeah. So your mom comes and she's much better at bossing people around in a hospital than I am. She's taking note of your vitals. She's just taking charge much better and modeling it for me in a way that I am now grateful to know how to do that. So now this is where we start to move on to week 2 in the hospital. Your mom's there for a few days. Again, she's good at this. She manages to get you a private room next door. One of the ways I'm able to sort of tell time and the timeline and all this is you were in 4 different rooms in this hospital. And so now we're on to room 2. And this is where it starts to become more about your physical condition than so much the internal infection. But now the problem is you haven't moved in over a week.
Right. And so physical therapy needs to begin at some point. But I remember just being so weak and in so much pain. And I know they're giving me painkillers. I was on a constant source of Dilaudid, which is some strong ass shit. I mean, if you're on a painkiller, that's what you want to be on. And I should be flying high through this, but I barely even registered that I'm getting this medication because my pain is so real that I can't even get high from it. What a fucking joke.
At the beginning of week 2, quite an ironic situation occurs. You had been interviewed previously to the hospital stay, when chemo was going great, you had been interviewed by the LA Times about, basically being a comedian going through cancer. And, it was like a human interest piece. We had a photographer come over to our house. He took these amazing photos with you and our pug Kimchi.
They came to a show.
Oh, they did. Yeah.
Yeah, they came and saw me at a show doing the material, and they saw what I was talking about and how I was presenting it and essentially healing myself while presenting this information in a crowd full of people. And that was basically the article, is that I was healing I was using punchlines to cope with everything that was going on.
Yeah. So we find out you at this point are still not using your phone. So I'm having to go through your phone once a day, maybe, just to make sure like you don't have anything scheduled. I'm like canceling your comedy shows that you've booked out and just somewhat checking your text messages, just making sure there's nobody that like needs to get a hold of you. And I see an email from the LA Times writer that was like, oh, this is coming out in tomorrow's print editions. So this article, and if you're watching the video, I'll put a picture up, like just this like great article with like a silly photo of you and Kimchi is in the LA Times the day you're like dying in the hospital.
Yeah, and actually multiple nurses and doctors brought in the print edition, because I remember like people were just like, oh my God, have you seen this? Who are you? What's going on here? And the infectious disease specialist, I will never forget this. She comes in holding the newspaper and she goes, who are you? What is this? And I was like, I'm a comedian. And she just looks at me and she goes, well, I don't think you're very funny. And I was like, thank you so much. Roasting is my love language. You have no idea what this means to me. Yeah, I had not been putting my career on display inside Hollywood Presbyterian. Yes, I was making a joke every now and then, but I wasn't talking about my life as a comedian. So all of a sudden, if you have a huge article in the LA Times, they start to go, well, hang on a second. Holy shit, you are somebody at least worth writing about. So then, yeah, that brought up a lot of questions that day. Now, you never got a copy of that, did you?
I didn't, because by the time we found out, and I didn't make it. First of all, like, where do you buy a newspaper?
I don't know.
I reached out to a couple friends. I'm like, does anybody have this? Like, is it sitting around your office? But we didn't find out till later in the day that it was out. And then I think I ran into a CVS on my way home from the hospital, and like, I don't know, they didn't have any papers. You got to buy your paper early in the morning. That's what I learned.
That's when the paper boy comes.
So then we're in week 2, and it's actually Thanksgiving week.
Oof.
Your mom was in town. Before all the hospital nonsense, we were going to go over to Mike and Jess's, friends from, their names keep coming up. We were going to go over there for Thanksgiving. Your mom was not planning to be in town. My sisters, it ended up that my 2 sisters and I were in the hospital that day. We somehow got away with sneaking in more visitors than were allowed. I figured out a way around the system. And so the 3 of us, my sisters and I, basically sat around your hotel room.
My hotel room. You keep saying it.
Jesus.
This is a dilapidated Motel 6 at best. This is the worst hotel room you ever want to stay in. This is not even a Quality Inn.
Yeah.
This is.
So we're sitting around your hospital room. We actually sent your mom over to Mike and Jess's for Thanksgiving because I felt your mom could use some socialization, which I had not been very good at giving her at that point, because I needed the opposite of social interactions. I needed to go home and just not talk to anybody and like lay on the couch and cuddle my dogs. And there were some nights where I would just come home and like cry and collapse on the floor. So that was my like recouping time. So it was good your mom got to enjoy some time with our friends who she was close with, having met them at the wedding and visited a bunch. And I just remember us on Thanksgiving talking about Taco Bell.
Well, something that had happened, because they were giving me all this soft minced food, was I started to have a nostalgia for Taco Bell, which I ate all the time growing up. I loved it so much. I spent thousands of dollars there while I was in high school, just getting stoned and being there at 2 a.m. Taco Bell parking lot parties. Everybody knows about it. And that was the place to be because it's the only thing open. So you go there and you just eat all of this mushy, delicious whatever is in their food. It's not real, whatever it is, but it's delicious. And for some reason, that's all I wanted when I was in the hospital, because people were like, can I bring you like some Chinese food? Can I bring you Thai? Can I bring you Italian? And my taste buds weren't working properly, but all I wanted was just the soft, familiar taste of a Taco Bell 7-layer burrito inside of me, which they don't even make anymore, but any sort of Taco Bell burrito, I fell in love with them again in that hospital. So if there's one thing that hospital stay did for me, other than save my life, it reintroduced me to Taco Bell.
How great for the rest of us.
How great for Taco Bell. Hey, put me in a commercial, Taco Bell. That's your endorsement.
All right. Well, I think this is the perfect transition to our next story, which needs a trigger warning and a skip ahead.
Oh, okay. Are we going into where I haven't gone to the bathroom for a while?
Yes, I think this was also part of the reason you wanted Taco Bell.
Maybe. Yes. Yes.
Let's just say if you're not interested in hearing about Alex's first enema and his experience going to the bathroom for the first time in 9 days, skip ahead the next 3 or so minutes.
Yeah, that should be about what it takes. At one point, a doctor realized that I had not gone to the bathroom in 9 days. And that was a no-no in the hospital. They said, we need to get that whatever's inside of you out. Now, I hadn't been eating, so I didn't really think that there was that much in there. But I guess it was enough that it had been building up inside of me. And so one day, a nurse came in and she said, hey, we're going to do an enema. I have heard that word before. I listened to Blink-182's Enema of the State, but I didn't really know what an enema was. And I quickly learned that they were going to shoot 15 ounces of water up my poop chute, and at which point it would break up all of the fecal matter inside of me, and then I'd be able to go to the bathroom. Now, I often equate my hospital stay to being like in prison. This was the most prison-like day because now I'm also going to, against my will, have something go up my butt. And I will say, the nurse that did it, I apologized immediately that she had to do that. She said, it's part of my job. She was very attractive, which I don't know if that's better or worse. I don't know if I would have run into some hideous troll to do it, but a beautiful woman, I kind of was like, I don't know, I took a little solace in that fact that she had to do that job. And I remember her saying, you're going to have about 2 minutes to get to the toilet. And at the time, I still was not moving well at all. I had not gotten out of bed. So that was my biggest concern, is that I was going to shart everywhere and it was going to become D-Day inside of my bed. Luckily, she shoots it up there and you feel it go up there, and it's kind of an interesting reaction. So to anyone who's ever had anal sex and enjoyed it, I get it. I immediately roll over, I get my feet onto the floor, and I sit in the bedside commode, this little plastic chair that was there because I wasn't going to make it all the way to the toilet. And immediately it started. I'd gotten there within 90 seconds. The next 45 minutes that I was on that thing were brutal because it wasn't just like it broke up and shot out of me. It was basically like trying to squeeze a basketball into a golf hole. It was so uncomfortable, very painful, and it just took so long. And I remember at the end, it was just like cannonballs were inside, like almost like if you've ever been duck pin bowling, that size bowling ball was just filling this. But I felt incredible. I apologized to the nurse for what was in there. Again, she said this is part of my job. And wow, what a relief, though.
I think this is a great point to give a shout out to nurses because they were spectacular. You were there for 33 days. You had, 2 nurses a day. That's 60 something nurses. There was maybe one that wasn't great. Nurses do so much and they put up with so much shit, literally. And I am just so grateful to them, and every nurse that I know, they are just the unsung heroes of medical care.
Yeah, the doctors are very clinical. The nurses are more human towards you. And also it helped that I am a very kind person, even in this state where I know I don't want to be in this hospital, but I'm not going to take it out on the people that are taking care of me. And I listened to what they had to go through on the other side of my walls, because I would hear these psychopaths just screaming at them that they want their drugs. I heard one guy throw a plate of food at a nurse. So they would come into my room and I would just make sure that they knew they were appreciated. I would be extremely gracious toward them. And every once in a while, they'd be like, thank you so much. You were so sweet. I'm going to give you an extra 25 milligrams of Dilaudid today. And then I was like, that's what I really wanted. I was chasing that Dilaudid dragon. Every time they put it in, I had about 10 to 12 seconds where I was like, oh, that's what chasing the dragon means, because that is pure bliss. So shout out to nurses. Thank you for everything that you do.
So some of the other medical developments that are going around this time is your whole body swelling is starting to reduce, but your knee is not. There is a big problem with your knee.
Right. And now they were doing a lot of procedures in the hospital. I had multiple CT scans, 4 of those. I had 3 MRIs, and one of the MRIs they had to do was for my knee because they couldn't figure out why the swelling was not reducing. And I'll never forget this MRI. It caused me some PTSD for a while because my body was swelled up from the edema. In an MRI, you have to stay very still. And to get my knee in the position they needed, they had to twist my leg. And I just remember screaming, and they needed me to stay still for 45 minutes. I screamed for 45 minutes, just crying, because the only way I could alleviate the pain and get through it was to make some sort of audible noise. And it was awful. But what they learned from that MRI was that they asked me if I had any injuries, and I was like, oh yeah, when I was 17, I fractured my knee rollerblading, and I had an MRI at that time, but they didn't think it was significant enough for them to actually go in there and do a surgery. So while I had to do some physical exercises, I never actually got that taken care of. And for years, my knee would just kind of randomly pop out, but I thought I had fixed the problem through slacklining and re-strengthening my muscles. I didn't think it was an issue anymore, but apparently edema and sepsis was like, nah, we're going to make this an issue all over again.
Yeah, so this is a recurring thing. They drain your knee, it swells back up. We're still dealing with the sepsis and the heart vegetation and a number of other things. So it's not the main priority right now, but it's something that we're going to need to get solved to get you out of there.
They did try multiple aspirations, just like I had the bone marrow aspiration. Again, they take this yard-long needle and it goes in through your knee, and they just start trying to get any fluid out of there that they can. But they immediately realize there is way too much in there. It is not going to come out. And at some point, something more serious is going to need to happen.
From the moment we took you to the ER, you were swelling up, and a doctor's looking at your wedding ring going, oh, we're going to have to cut that off. And I'm like, great, cut it off. Just cut it off. But they don't do it right away. They don't do it the first week, even though it's brought up multiple times. I don't care. Cut it off. Take care of my husband. But finally, what happened?
Well, did they ever try to grease it up or anything like that? Like butter it like you see in the movies?
I don't remember that, no.
Okay. So this night I remember bits and pieces of, because I was woken up, it was 2 or 3 in the morning, and I woke up and there were 5 people surrounding me, and I'm like, hey, what's going on? They're like, that wedding ring needs to come off right now or you are going to lose that finger from circulation loss. And I was like, oh shit. Okay. So they break out this Black & Decker tool and they immediately start trying to cut through it. And my wedding ring will not break. And they were like, God, what is up with this thing? And I just kept saying, you will never break our love. It is too strong for you. It took over 45 minutes. And you're kind of scared because, yes, this tool is designed to do this, but you're also thinking one little slip and my finger is going to come off. What's going to happen here? I remember the extreme heat building up. They kept having to stop because it was getting so hot on my finger that it was causing little burns. And it took all 5 of them. And I was like, why are all of you here? And 2 of them were like, we just want to see. We're just honestly, we've never seen this happen before, and we just want to be here. I'm like, oh, cool. I'm a circus variety show, and I'm the weirdo that you are paying to walk into a tent to see the world's fattest man or whatever. It was just so bizarre. I really felt like I was on display a lot of the time that I was in the hospital, with 7 doctors coming to see me every single day. All of these instances. But finally, that wedding ring did snap, and we still have it. It's in 2 pieces. I wear a silicone ring now because I am way too afraid to put a piece of metal back on my finger.
When you were first diagnosed with cancer, I signed up for therapy. I was like, it's time. I've always sort of thought about this. I mentioned this in previous episodes. I was like, I feel like this is a great time to get a therapist. And at the same time, I had suggested the same for you, but we had different insurances because we did just got married that year and we hadn't combined our insurance yet. You struggled to get in with any sort of online therapy program.
Yeah, remember when we said, like, if you want to get into an ER fast and get triage, say you have cancer? Not the same thing with getting a therapist. They were like, why do you need a therapist? I was like, I have cancer right now, and I really need to talk to someone about it. They were like, great. Well, it's about 3 to 4 months for the queue right now, but we'll contact you whenever we have someone available.
Right. And so it turned out you got your appointment for your therapy evaluation while you were in the hospital.
The same day I got that super painful MRI on my knee. So I had gone through that morning, and then knowing I didn't know that was going to happen that morning, but I knew my therapy was that morning. So I then had to do my first therapy appointment through Zoom in a hospital. And that was one of the first things that she said to me. She goes, are you in a hospital right now? And I was like, yeah. Remember in my notes when I said, why do you need therapy? Because I'm going through cancer right now? Well, we've taken a turn for the worse. So thanks for finally showing up. Now, I had filled out a form explaining all of this and why I wanted to go to therapy. And I guess, like any doctor, I thought I could really tell them anything, but I was super honest about my recreational drug use. And one of the questions she asked me was, did you smoke crack in July? And I was like, no, I've never smoked crack. I didn't mark on a form that I smoked crack. I know myself. Even as a joke, I wouldn't have done that. And she said, no, you checked a box asking if you used crack/cocaine. I was like, well, that slash is carrying a lot of weight. You need to separate those items. Okay, it is one thing to hit the slopes when a batch of fresh powder drops, but when the snow melts and it turns to rocks, get off the mountain. I had never smoked crack. Yes, I had done some nose powder back in my day, but that was not the issue. So either way, super weird first therapy session, just because I was going through so many things. And by the time it got there, it wasn't just like I'm having chemotherapy. Now it was, I just got out of an MRI tube. I'm seeing 7 doctors a day. Nobody knows what's wrong with me. My body is swelled up like a balloon. Shall I keep going?
That was also the time when you started physical therapy in the hospital, because you've been in bed for 10 days, 2 weeks, not moving, not standing up, not going to the bathroom. You're using a bedpan or a catheter. And it was time to get you up, because that was becoming majorly the concern more than the sepsis now, is the fact that you haven't moved in 10 days.
Right. So I need to move. So a physical therapist shows up to my room, and I remember the first one, he was like, so let's start by getting out of bed. Could not do that. That was impossible for me. I was so weak. My body had atrophied to the point where all of the swelling combined with not moving at all, I just couldn't. I was unable to pick myself up and put my feet on the floor. And I remember I felt like the therapist was almost a little bit frustrated with me. Maybe that's just what's going on in my own head. But I remember them being like, okay, but put your feet on the floor. And I was like, I can't. And I feel like he kind of felt like I was just saying I can't do it, but really I couldn't do it.
That was a long road, the road to physical therapy. In the meantime, I'm struggling emotionally. I'm not trying to.
Why?
I'm not trying to show it to you. I'm trying to be strong, but I am having some breakdowns of my own. There was a situation where I'd come home from being at the hospital all day, and I had ordered dog food online because I just decided it was easier. Let me just order whatever I can to make my life easier online and have it delivered at home. And something like our buzzer was broken, or it wasn't connected to the to my phone the right way. And so this dog food hadn't been delivered. I had to somehow go to UPS store and pick up this stupid dog food, and I just left this really nasty voicemail for our building manager. It was just like, why isn't this working? My husband's in the hospital. And I would come home and cry on the floor because we didn't get the dog food.
Really, on the floor?
Yeah, get in the door, collapse on the floor, let the dogs lick my face.
Oh God. I mean, you were at that time, you were visiting me every single day. There was not a day that went by when I was in that hospital when you took a day off. Even when my mom was there, you still came for at least an hour or two every day, often more than that. And you're still working. You're still taking care of your job, your business, our dogs. There's so much going on. And man, the thought of you just being on the floor crying, it breaks me. It really does.
Yeah. And now I think about what if I had been pregnant through all that, right?
Oh.
The stress, the That would not have been good. And or the like the physical symptoms. What if I was also nauseous through all of it?
I'm just thinking that level of stress, that would have been the equivalent of you just smoking 2 packs a day and downing a gallon of vodka at the same time to that fetus, because there's no way that fetus is getting positive emotional charge, because what's going on in your brain is transferring into the fetus, correct?
Yeah.
In many
Yes,
ways?
stress is a hormone, and that's all physical stuff more than just even mental.
Yeah. So, I mean, back when, when you have the miscarriage, you don't think like, well, something worse is coming, so it's going to be fine. But at this point, it's probably for the best that you're not pregnant.
Yeah, I don't know about that for sure, but in hindsight, I see it. I see the timeline. If you want to talk about like this little bit of spirituality of it all, like maybe that baby saw what was coming and was like, not right now. Let's try this again later.
Yeah, the spirit baby itself was floating in the realm, just going, is this the time that I actualize? And then it goes, you know what? It looks like you guys are dealing with some stuff in there. I'll come back a little bit later on when maybe you guys have your shit figured out.
Yeah. So I'm, literally going through it emotionally, and you're in the hospital basically kind of bored at this point. By the end of week 2 or so, you're just like sitting there watching the World Cup, eating ice chips.
The World Cup was a savior for me at that time, just because at least I had live sports to watch. And the World Cup happens once every 4 years, and I had all the time in the world to watch the matches when normally I would have been working or doing something and like not having access to it. But I was like, all right, this could be worse. Every once in a while, I remember the lung specialist. He would come in and I'd be like, are we doing a lung check today? He goes, nah, you're fine. I just want to watch the World Cup. I'd be like, do I have to pay for you to be here? Because I'm pretty sure I'm paying for every visit when you come in. So if you just want to hang out, buddy, I don't know about this.
So at this point, I'm not at the hospital 8 hours a day anymore. I'm working on my business in the morning, just trying to find some normalcy in my life. Now that you're communicating, you're on your phone, I can text you, we can call, it's not as dire of a situation anymore. It's really just about you getting your body physically better. So there's one morning I get up, I go to yoga for the first time in weeks, and I come out of there just feeling like, oh my God, yes, this is exactly what I needed. And I have a missed phone call from you. And this is the day we find out our insurance has been canceled.
Yeah, this was one hell of a fucking twist for me. Is I wake up and a woman has woken me up. She's walked through the door and I'm like, are we doing blood work? And she goes, no, hi, I'm from your insurance company. And I was like, oh, what's going on? She goes, your insurance has been canceled. And I went, wait, what? And she goes, thank you, and walked out. That was it. So immediately I'm on the phone with Lauren. I'm calling and it's going to voicemail. I'm like, Lauren, they canceled insurance. Wherever you are, please, I need you. Whatever's going on, I need you. And meanwhile, you are in downward dog, trying to breathe, trying to just have a wonderful shavasana so you can actually get a moment of relief from the hell that your life has become, between the parking garage, my mother being there for a while, all of these things. And yet then you come out to, oh my God, emergency. Our insurance has collapsed. Now, what actually happened?
We'll just kind of gloss over it because nobody wants to hear the boring details of insurance. But basically, what happened was, because we'd gotten married that year, we were then applying for the next year to combine our health insurance. But for some reason, they canceled it a month early, and they just haphazardly decided to cancel Alex's insurance and not my insurance. We're like, if they'd canceled my insurance, it wouldn't have been a big deal at all because I was not currently undergoing medical care. So I called Covered California because at that time I was working for myself. So I was going through the marketplace for insurance. And I will say both Covered California and our insurance company at that time was incredibly helpful. It was like a 3-hour phone call, and the Covered California guy was on the phone the entire time. He was like, I'm going to make sure this gets taken care of. All you have to do is say, my husband has cancer and he's currently an inpatient in the hospital, and they'll act pretty quickly. They can escalate it. What normally would take a month got done in 3 hours.
Yeah, they expedited me very, very quickly. Front of the line pass.
Yeah. So you're making physical therapy progress at this point. You're getting out of bed. You're able to take some steps, but they don't want you to make too much progress.
No, that was one thing where I remember on the third day where I was actually doing physical therapy, I took 8 steps with a walker, and I was like, I think I can go a little bit more. And the nurse said, we cannot have you walk another step. Otherwise, we have to report it to insurance, and they're going to say you're well enough to be out of the hospital. And I was like, for 8 steps? He's like, do not take a 9th step. And if you do, I didn't see it. So at this point, I'm thinking, geez, these insurance rules are so strict. All I want to do is be able to move past the point where I am moving, because even just to get to this point had taken so much effort. And so I can't take more than 8 steps. What is the next thing that happens?
Well, so they start talking about wanting to move you to their acute rehab floor, which they said, we've got a great rehab facility here. You know, we're going to do everything we can to get insurance to cover it. That's really the best next step for him. He'll still have all the, you know, the medical care, the IV, if he needs a MRI, if he needs some sort of scan, he'll be able to do it here, but he'll also get like 2 physical therapy and 1 occupational therapy session a day. So it would also help with like your boredom and your progress. Before the physical therapy started, you were hopeless. You were despondent. You were out of it. I knew that like once you had a goal and once you had something to work towards, you'd crush it, right? Like that's just how you are and how you live your life. So giving you more of that at that time was exactly what you needed. I also was in no way ready for you to come home. You could barely move. The amount of medical care you needed was way beyond my ability to manage. I understand there are nurses that can come to your house. There's all that, but I was just terrified. And I was still suffering some trauma from the night I had to take you to the hospital, because all of a sudden, all the decisions were on me. I had to judge if you need how much immediate medical care you needed. Where right now within the hospital, if you had another stroke or whatever, there was someone, a professional there to make that decision. And so I was relieved to not have to be in charge of that at that point. And I was not ready for you to come home. And I don't think you were ready to come home either.
No, I mean, I could barely move still. So then they do move me to the cute rehab floor because I'm so cute.
Yeah.
Right, obviously.
Yeah, the cutie rehab floor.
The cutie rehab floor, that's where I live. So they moved me to the acute rehab floor, and I still have my own room. And now, like we said, multiple sessions a day in the physical therapy room, occupational therapy. And this is where I know, yes, I'm going to get better. My very first physical therapist, I'll never forget him, this young Asian guy, came in with all the energy, basically bouncing off the walls. Get going. You ready for this, champ? Here we go, champ. And I just felt like this guy is perfect for me, but it's also so much because no matter what I did, he's like, man, you're great, champ. And I was just like, do you have any idea who I was on the outside of these walls? Like, I play tennis, I slackline for hours at a time. I am a physical person. I will dance until the sun comes up. And now I'm literally taking like 1 step on a walking treadmill, and this guy is acting like I just won the World Series. It was a little overkill, but also, look, it was great. I needed people like that in my life. That physical therapy room, it's so funny because it's almost like a giant adult playroom. They have all of these different tools and machines that you use to get better. One of them, they have a fake car that looks like a little Honda Fit, and you basically have to climb in and out of this car. And I will say, as stupid as it felt, it was really good practice for when I got out, because climbing in and out of a car, it turns out, was not that easy. So I did that every day. I would go up and down 4 steps. I always remember up to heaven, down to hell. You got to use your strong foot first and then your weak foot on the way down. The occupational therapist, that was always hilarious to me, because one day they had a fake kitchen inside the rehab room, and she goes, okay, I want you to act like you're making soup. Lauren, have I ever made soup in my entire life?
Literally never.
No, at that point especially, my main meals were bagged salads that I would buy from the grocery store in multiple flavors. So now she's telling me to get out ingredients to make soup just so I can start reaching into cabinets and pulling stuff down. It just all felt so ridiculous. But again, 3 hours a day where I am not laying in bed was fantastic.
We really, like, at this point, we're feeling the hope. We're feeling seeing your progress, physical progress every day is helping me start to realize that, okay, you're not going to be a vegetable. You're not going to be in a wheelchair. Like, because there were periods of time where I was really worried we wouldn't get you back.
Yeah. Well, also, even when I was in the rehab room, I'm looking around at these like 80-year-old people that are doing the same exercises as me, and yet they're doing them better. And that was all the motivation I needed to be like, no, 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 I am not here yet. I am not an octogenarian. I am a 37-year-old man. I am fully capable of doing these tasks. And every day I got stronger and stronger and stronger. I remember there was a day when Mike came to visit me in the hospital because the Ravens game was on. And I was like, Mike, bring your laptop in and we can watch the Ravens game together. And I just remember him being there, and the nurse was like, oh, you brought a friend today. And I was like, yeah, this is one of my best friends. And she was one of those nurses that was so jovial, but would constantly like give me shit in a really great way that I just loved. Like, she was a little adversarial towards me, but always kind. And when Mike came in, she's like, oh, you brought a little friend today. And I was like trying to explain, it's like, this is one of my closest friends ever, one of my best friends from high school. And I was treating it like she was our server. I was like, Mike, what do you want? You want a Coke? You want a juice? Do you want a Sprite? What do you need? We can get you anything you need in here. Welcome to Hotel Hospital, as Lauren would call it. And the Ravens game is on, and I go, whoa, I need to go to the bathroom. Now, ever since the enema, I hadn't gone again yet. And this was the first time I felt like I think I can do this on my own. And I remember hobbling to the bathroom, being in there like 20, 30 minutes, getting the job done. And I even yelled from the bathroom, I did it, Mike, I did it. And when I came out of the bathroom, Mike was crying. And I was like, are you okay? Because I'm just so proud of you, man. And the nurse came in at that point, found him crying, asked what happened. And I said, I just took a shit. She goes, you two are a lot. I was like, yeah, we are. But what a beautiful moment that Mike and I got to share while the Ravens were playing. Fly, Ravens, fly.
Let's talk about my favorite, most hilarious story from your hospital stay.
Oh, okay.
So this was a weekend with the weekend doctors where they're basically just trying to keep you alive over the weekend. You're not going to make any progress because everyone else is just checked out. And this one doctor comes in and he literally walks into your room and he goes, have you ever had a blood transfusion before? And you're like, what? No. And he's like, all right, well, here's how it works. And you're going to do this. You're going to do this. And I'm just like, excuse me, a blood transfusion that seems a little extreme. And he's like, well, your iron's low or whatever it was. So this is what we need to do. And I'm like, are you sure about that? He's really gone through a lot. Have you talked to his oncologist? And he's like, no. This is what happens. This is what we do here. I'm just like, I'm getting better at this medical advocacy thing. Now we're like 3 weeks into your hospital stay. And I'm just like, no, I call the oncologist, get his approval, then you can do a blood transfusion. We're not just pumping this guy who's been through quite a lot over the past few weeks with someone else's blood. I'm not allowing it. And so he did. He went and called your oncologist. Your oncologist was like, no. Do not do that. He's, been through chemo. He's going through cancer. This number's a little low. That's completely expected. Please do not. I will say that doctor did not come back in your hotel.
Again with the hotel room.
That doctor did not come back in your hospital room at all.
No, and actually that's where we've used the term weekend doctor a couple times here. That's where it came from, is because Lauren said, where did this information come from? And the guy goes, I don't know, I'm just a weekend doctor. Which I was like, oh, I'm sorry, is this a side gig for you? Do you have another career? Do you own a floral shop that we should know about and frequent when we're out of here? And you're just doing this on weekends for some extra money? What are you talking about? No, that guy did not come in. We often refer to him as Dr. Spaceman from 30 Rock, if you're familiar with Chris Parnell's character, because it just seemed to be the most ridiculous person to be giving us information. And I'm so glad you were there then, because if you hadn't been there, I would have been like, great, blood transfusion. Sounds good. Hook it up, buddy.
Yeah. So at this point, you're physically getting better, but your knee is still pretty swollen and it's hindering your physical therapy progress.
Yeah, they don't know what's going on. They've tried 3 aspirations. It is not going down. And they're really not sure what to do at this point.
Yeah, but they're talking about discharging you. You've had your time in the acute rehab unit. It might be time for you to go home, Alex. And I think I might be ready. I'm definitely ready to get out of this hospital and coming to see you. So it's a talk. It's not so much a set date. Well, insurance will cover this many more days, but we're starting to talk about you coming home.
I was getting stronger at that point. They're giving me these tasks in the rehabilitation room where I was really excelling and doing well. They had a lot of hope for me. I had a lot of hope for myself that I was on the rebound. At one point, I had this wonderful young occupational therapist named Michael, and he said, "Hey, I have an idea. Instead of us going to the room and us doing some random exercises, do you want to go outside?" Now, I hadn't been outside in almost a month. It had been like 26 days that I'd been in there. And I was like, how do we go outside? And he goes, well, there's this secret little place where the nurses go to have their breaks. And it's late enough right now that no one's here. So we can just go sit outside. And I remember it was like December. It was a little chilly outside, but I was just so happy to be out there. And it was overlooking the city. And Michael and I just sat out there and had a conversation. And I was so grateful for him in that moment to just have any sort of reprieve from being inside those walls. I had a window, I could look outside, but now I could feel the fresh air, and I cried out there a little bit. I mean, I cried a lot in that hospital, but I really cried when I was outside just because I was so thankful that he took me out there.
So things are finally starting to look up. We're talking about discharge, you're getting stronger, you're able to like do things, go to the bathroom by yourself. We're feeling really good. So one morning, I'm making my regular rounds, driving to the hospital, and I give you a call. Do you want anything? You're eating food. Do you want Taco Bell? What can I possibly feed you? And you ask for a Frappuccino. I'm like, okay, great. I'm going to stop at Starbucks, be there in 20 minutes. Totally normal. 20 minutes later, I'm walking down the hallway of the hospital, and I just hear you wailing. Like the most painful, sobbing experience. And I'm just like, oh my God, they made him do another MRI. That's all I could think. But when I got to your room, you looked at me and said,
my dad died.
And I sat down on your bed and I started crying with you. And all I could think at that point is like, what the fuck is happening to us?
And we will pick up there on the next episode of Hopefully Kidding. Stay tuned.